3 sinister night drives, spine-chilling true stories of the haunted and forbidden. Unexplained. Sarah Johnson never expected her summer road trip to turn into a nightmare. As a single mother struggling to balance grueling night shifts as a nurse and the tender needs of her 2 young children, Emily and Jake, every summer, they escaped to visit distant relatives. But this year was different. As the sun cast a golden glow on the endless fields they drove past, laughter filled their cramped sedan. But tales of restless spirits from her childhood haunted her thoughts. Those ghost stories still lingered, chilling her bones every time the wind whispered through the trees. While a warm breeze danced through the open windows, a hint of unease colored the air as they ventured into thicker, shadowy woods. A sputtering engine forced Sarah to pull over at a dilapidated rest stop, rumored to have witnessed disappearances. It looked as if time had stopped. Rusted vending machines and peeling signs created an eerie atmosphere. An unsettling feeling rippled down her spine, and she took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm for her kids. "Mama, I'm hungry," Jake whined, his little face scrunching in impatience. "Can we eat now?" "Yeah, Mama. Let us find snacks," Emily chimed in, nudging the old vending machine. Forced smiles masked Sarah's fear as she rummaged through her bag, but for some reason, the snacks felt inadequate for the growing tension around them. Then, she saw him, the hitchhiker, strolling down the road, his presence sending instinctive alarm bells ringing in her gut. He gave a casual wave, his unsettling smile carving a deep discomfort in her heart. "Keep the doors locked, kids," Sarah murmured, her eyes locked onto the stranger's piercing gaze as he approached. "Just stay close to me." Just then, clumps of wind whisked through the area, stirring the silence that surrounded them. He called out to her like he knew them. "You've got 2 precious little ones there." He leaned closer, his voice smooth yet laced with undertones that made her skin crawl. "You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them, would you?" A shiver ripped through Sarah. How did he know? Heart racing, she inched back, squeezing her kids' hands, eyes darting to the churning shadows of the woods as they pressed closer together. Before she could think straight, the flickering radio inside the rest stop crackled to life. Static washed over them, a chorus of ghostly transmissions begging for help. Distant voices echoed, blending into a frenzy of confusion, and the stillness turned suffocatingly thick. Panic swept through her as she reached for her phone. Dead. The shadows swayed ominously as night descended, a heaviness settling around them. The radio sputtered an urgent call from a local authority, insisting they stay put for protection. A cold chill assaulted her as she recognized the voice, someone she thought she could trust, but now felt like a specter from her past. "Stay where you are. We're coming for you." The voice echoed through her mind. Fear ballooned in her chest. "We need to leave now," she said urgently, pulling her children close. The hitchhiker grinned wider, that predatory glint in his eyes shining brighter than the moon creeping in. She could feel something sinister in the air, a web of secrets closing in on them. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." As the air turned colder, the trees seemed to whisper secrets of those who vanished. No breath of wind, just an unnatural stillness. A deeper, monstrous sound echoed from the woods, freezing Sarah's blood. Eyes scanning the shadows, biting into the darkness, she tightened her grip on her children. A decision weighed heavily on her, a choice between facing the unholy tension of this rest stop or confronting the mysterious hitchhiker and the sinister force lurking behind the official voice of safety. Stepping outside into the cold night, she took a shaky breath, for she had a haunting realization. The danger may not only be from restless spirits of the past, but the very authorities sworn to protect them. And just like that, those unearthly shadows surged closer, turning her escape into an uncertain plunge into terror. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the clearing as Sarah stepped away from the rusting rest stop, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The children flanked her, their wide eyes reflecting fear that mirrored her own. They had almost forgotten the hitchhiker, but he stood there, a sentinel draped in shadows. His grin hadn't faded, sinister and knowing. It sent fresh chills rippling through Sarah's body. "Mama, where are we going?" Jake whimpered, sensing the tension that threatened to spill over. "Just stay with me," she instructed, not sure of their next move. The trees loomed like ancient watchers, branches clawing at the air. The whispers seemed to grow louder, words devolving into a cacophony of despair. With shaky hands, she broke into a hesitant jog, pulling her children along as they made a beeline for the safety of the car. The sooner they were back on the road, the better. But the nature around her wasn't cooperating. The rustling of leaves escalated into a symphony of shrieks, as if unseen phantoms waged war in the depths of the woods. The chill cut deeper as they reached the car. Sarah fumbled with the keys, her fingers trembling against the metal. Come on, she whispered under her breath, panic licking at her heels. Behind her, footsteps crunched on the gravel. Swallowing hard, she turned to face the hitchhiker, who now stood uncomfortably close, his eyes glinting with something vicious, a predator closing in for the kill. "Not so fast, are we?" he taunted, his voice a sickening purr. "Get away from us," she shouted, her voice breaking, panic surging. The predator's smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp and too white against the dark. Just then, a loud bang erupted from the woods, a crack, like thunder shattering the tension. Without thinking, Sarah whipped around to look, her heart racing. From the depths of the forest, a figure emerged, grotesque, yet familiar. It was as if the darkness had taken shape, twisting into a person that left her paralyzed. "Mama!" Emily cried, clinging tight to her side, sensing the shift in energy. The smoky figure climbed from the shadows, a haunting echo of a memory someone Sarah thought she had left behind. With a jaw that cracked open wider than what seemed possible, it watched her with empty eyes, dripping with a putrid darkness that made her stomach turn. "Is this what you wanted?" The apparition rasped, its voice chilling her to the core. "To play in the night?" Sarah's grip tightened on Jake and Emily. Her instincts shouted at her to run, but her feet were glued in place. The tension crescendoed. The hitchhiker took a step back, captivated, intrigued by the chaos. The two figures, one born of flesh and blood, the other of shadows and deeply held fears, danced together in a twisted ballet around her. The hitchhiker's delight turned to annoyance as he stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come here, then." "No one leaves this place." With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah broke free from her frozen state, flinging open the car door and dragging her children inside. She slammed the door, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. "Start. Please, please." She begged the engine, turning the key with fierce desperation. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. Relief washed over her momentarily. She threw the car into reverse. But before she could escape, the hitchhiker stepped into her path, unyielding, the forest holding its breath. Shadows swarmed around them, tightening their grip in a choking embrace as she put her foot on the gas. Just before accelerating hard, she caught a last glimpse of the ghostly figure, a mouth gaping wide, smiling with hunger. "Drive, Mama," yelled Jake as the world around them twisted, blurred, and the night swallowed them whole. As they sped away, the road ahead twisted into the mist, every shadow morphing into the ghostly forms of those who had come before. With what felt like the weight of 1,000 spirits pushing from behind, Sarah raced into the unknown, desperate for freedom. But the hitchhiker's voice followed her in the night, taunting, echoing, "Run all you want, but you can't escape the darkness." The road before her faded into the infinite, leaving her with a terrifying question. Had they truly left it behind? Or had they only awakened something far more dangerous on their journey? The car sped down the winding road, its headlights slicing through the thick fog that clung to the night like a predator stalking its prey. Each twist and turn felt like a passing eternity, the oppressive silence only broken by the children's quiet whimpers and Sarah's frantic breaths. Breath, in and out. Her mind raced, replaying the night's events like a haunting melody, all too familiar, all too terrifying. "Mama, what was that?" Emily trembled, her voice barely a whisper, fear laced in every syllable. "Just stay close. We're safe in here," Sarah said, though the words felt hollow. Was it true? The hitchhiker lurked somewhere behind them, crafted from nightmares, a lingering curse upon their souls. Time blurred as the road stretched endlessly before them. Trees loomed like giants, reaching for something only they could grasp. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, making her heart race with every sight. The more she looked, the more she felt watched, as if unseen eyes studied their every move, hungry for a slip, a mistake. With a sudden jolt, the car veered on a rough patch of tarmac. "Hold on," Sarah yelled, gripping the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, a shape flickered, a ghostly figure standing in the middle of the road, silhouetted against the dwindling light. Her breath froze. "Don't look," she ordered, but Jake was already pointing. "Mama, it's him," he shouted, backing away in his seat. "How could he possibly be here?" Sarah spat, wrestling with the urge to check the mirror. Something inside her demanded to know, while logic screamed to keep moving. Logic lost. As she stole a glance, the hitchhiker smiled, still drenched in shadow, holding a hand up as if to wave. The horror deepened. The slight gesture felt like an invitation, drawing her back to that twisted reality. "Go, go," she shouted, pressing down on the accelerator. The engine roared in protest, battling against the confines of the night. The fog thickened, twisting into unnatural shapes that whirled around them, isolating her from the world. With each mile, every innocent turn of the wheel, her hope drained. She could almost feel the hitchhiker's breath on her neck, the pulse of darkness thrumming through the atmosphere. "Wait, stop, please," Jake cried, his voice slicing through her panic. "What?" Sarah screamed, swinging her head to him. His wide eyes clouded with dread as he pointed. The road in front of them twisted wickedly. It was no longer a straight path, but a snarl of veins, pulsing with an unnatural life. Memories of desperation clawed their way back, long nights spent avoiding the echoes of their past. Had they crossed into something worse? "Mama, it's calling us," Emily whimpered, her small hands gripping her brother harder. "Who is calling us?" The question hung heavy in the air, but no answer came. Whatever force was aligning on this road was unknown, yet it felt unyielding. Shadows seemed to reach out, stretching across the tarmac, wrapping around the tires like skeletal fingers. Sarah fought the rising swell of fear threatening to overtake her mind. Just then, the car shuddered, sputtering as though lingering spirits were interfering with the engine's flow. They were stranded now, enveloped. The silhouettes of the forest swaggered closer, creeping into view, thickening until she couldn't see where the trees ended and the shadows began. "Mama, please. We have to go back," Jake begged, tears streaking down his face. "What?" Sarah replied, disbelief mingling with dread. "Back." And then she saw it. In the chaos, a flicker of light emerged in the fog, illuminating something down the road, something shimmering that broke through the darkness. Hope. Or another trap. "What if it's—" she began, her voice trailing off into a fearful hush. The shriek echoed from the trees, piercing through her thoughts. The hitchhiker's laughter encircled them, drowning out the noise. "Run, run." With that, the car sputtered one last defiant cough before dying, darkness enclosing them. She had to make a choice. What awaited them: return to the road or confront whatever horror lay ahead? The question pressed painfully as they sat in the silence of night, waiting for the next move to reveal their fate. Somewhere in the shadows, something stirred, and it wasn't done with them yet. Sarah's heart raced, each thump echoing in her ears as the darkness closed in. The flickering light shimmered again, a golden hue that seemed to beckon them. Was it salvation or a snare meant to entrap them deeper in this nightmare? "Mama, we can't stay here," Jake pleaded, his voice, raw and quivering, sliced through her fog of confusion. Emily clung tighter to him, her small hands trembling against his forearm. "I know," but Sarah hesitated, her instincts pulling her in opposite directions. Fear gripped her throat like a vice. The trees whispered, their branches swaying eerily as if conversing among themselves. Shadows danced closer, merging with the darkness that enveloped the car. "Look," Jake pointed again. There's a road sign. It was barely visible through the thick fog, nearly swallowed by the encroaching darkness. With uncertainty gnawing at her, Sarah turned the car's wipers on, desperately trying to clear the windshield. The blade squeaked, fighting against the heavy droplets clinging to the glass. The sign emerged before her, and her stomach lurched. Beware, the great divide ahead. She could barely make sense of its meaning, but the warning felt like a curse spoken just for her. Mama. Emily's voice quivered, pulling Sarah's eyes back. Get ready. Sarah bought herself moments, turning the key in the ignition again. It sputtered in defiance, then coughed into life. Relief was short-lived. The engine's roar felt swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Go, go, Jake urged, panic lacing his tone. Sarah slammed her foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, wheels spinning on the gravel, rattling as they rolled. In the rearview mirror, she saw the hitchhiker's figure lingering at the tree line, no longer moving but merely watching, his face obscured in shadow. An icy finger traced down her spine. Faster, Mama. He's right behind us. Jake screamed. She didn't dare look back. Instead, her eyes focused on the glint of light ahead, growing brighter, a warm glow amidst the cold shadows. I know where we're going. It was a desperate truth she clung to. Memories of summer nights spent camping flickered in her mind, a campground down this very road, far from haunted whispers. They just had to reach it. But as if sensing their intentions, the fog thickened, swirling around them like a living entity. The car swerved erratically, and she fought to maintain control, the steering wheel slippery beneath her clammy hands. She barely caught sight of a shape darting past the trees, something large and dark that moved just out of the corner of her eye. Did you see that? Sarah's voice trembled. I don't want to be here. Emily whimpered, her innocence laden with dread. The trees on either side seemed to close in, their trunk-like bodies twisting vulnerably, reaching out for them in bizarre angles, widening the distance between them and safety. Sarah pressed the gas further down, praying for a shred of speed, while panic sang in her ears like an agonizing symphony. Suddenly, the car jolted violently, lurching as though something grabbed it from below. She glanced down just in time to see a sludge of black water bubbling up from the gravel. It coated the tires like a thick tar, pulling them back into the nightmare from which they tried to escape. Go, please, Jake cried over the roar of the engine. Fingers of darkness clawed at the windows, shadows elongating, pressing in. With her breath quickening, Sarah slammed the car into reverse, wrenching the wheel wildly. The tires screeched, but instead of gaining ground, they were pulled deeper. The flickering light ahead dimmed, replaced now by an unsettling shadow, a looming darkness that felt sentient, almost alive. What have they stumbled into? Mama. Emily's terrified whisper sent chills down her spine. Hold on. Just as she felt she was losing everything, the headlights illuminated a fork in the road. A choice was before her: right toward the shimmering light, or left toward the sinister unknown. Sarah's heart fought against her instincts, every fiber of her being screaming in protest. The noise grew louder, accompanied by the hitchhiker's sinister laughter keening in the air. As the shadows closed in on them, she twisted the wheel hard, praying the light wouldn't fail her now. She had to trust, didn't she? And then, in that blinding moment of choice, Sarah felt the car lurch, something slamming against the rear, and the distant laughter faded, replaced by a deafening silence. What had she chosen? The air felt charged with an eerie stillness as she pressed on. But what awaited them in that dreadful light? Or worse, what hunted them in the dark? The screeching tires fell into a haunting silence, the car eerily drifting toward the illuminated path. Sarah's heart thundered, drowning out even the muffled sounds of her children's breaths. The warm glow ahead did little to ease her dread. She could feel a weight pressing down on her chest, a promise of something terrible lurking just beyond the reach of her headlights. Where are we? Jake's voice cracked, small and fragile. I don't know, she stammered, trying to keep her gaze fixed on the light, which flickered like a candle barely holding on in a gale. Shadows loomed large around them, the peaceful dark now distorted into a threatening mass. The car rolled forward, the headlights fighting the encroaching darkness. And then she saw a dilapidated old structure emerging from the fog. It looked like a cabin, but it was different, ancient and twisted, as if built from nightmares. The wood was gnarled and blackened, the windows yawning, devoid of light, like the hollow eyes of a skull. Look, Mama. Emily pointed. Is that a house? Her voice held a mix of curiosity and foreboding. Mama, don't stop. Jake warned, eyes wide. The dim light seemed to beckon them. its warm embrace a stark contrast to the chill creeping into the car. But they had no choice. The car spluttered, its engine whined in sharp protests. Sarah felt as if the very air around them thickened, pressing against her. She turned the key, hoping against hope, begging for just a bit of strength to get them through. Nothing. Stay close, she told the kids, her voice shaking, squeezing the steering wheel while trying to resist the urge to glance at the looming cabin. But her eyes betrayed her. There was something beyond the building that pulled at her like a string. A figure stood at the edge of the light, shrouded in an oily darkness, a silhouette that seemed to sway on its own accord. "Can't we just keep driving?" Jake pleaded, panic edging his tone. "I'm trying," she whispered. But the car remained still, its engine exhausted, as if it knew better than to be part of whatever horror awaited them. The shadows closed in, thick and tangible, curling around the rear tires, as if hungry for their despair. The figure stepped closer, revealing a face, a terrible, twisted grin flashing under the light. It was the hitchhiker. "What does he want?" Emily whimpered, pressing her tiny palm against the window. The figure paused, tilting its head, fingers beckoning them to come out. "Get down," Sarah shouted, her hands trembling as she ducked low, heart racing like a runaway train. She fought the urge to flee, but her body felt paralyzed, the terror wrapping her like a shroud. Jake crouched beside Emily, fear reflected in their wide eyes. "Mama, we can't stay. Just wait. Please," she whispered, praying they'd be unnoticed. But the figure was smiling, wide and maniacal. It pointed toward the cabin, urging them with malevolent patience. As Sarah watched, praying for a miracle, the shadows shifted, swirling into shapes. Figures began to emerge, more than just the hitchhiker, far more. They were melting from the depths of the darkness, faces twisted in glee and malice, their aimless gestures beckoning them closer. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, panic clawing at her insides. She couldn't bear it. The car was their last refuge, but the encroaching darkness was relentless. If she stayed here, she'd lose them. "Hold on," she shouted, finding a shred of courage. She wrenched the door open, heart hammering as she leapt into the frigid night, pulling her children with her. "Mama, stay behind me," she hissed, moving toward the cabin, the very thing that had lured them in with its sickly glow. Each step felt wrong, every inch forward a betrayal of her instincts. But she had no choice now. The darkness stirred, hungry and relentless, and behind her, the car door slammed shut with a finality that sealed their fates. "What waits for us inside?" The thought gnawed at her sanity as she touched the cold, warped wood of the cabin door. It felt alive, resonating under her fingertips. And then, before she could turn back, the door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness. Something within awaited them. Would it swallow them whole or bleed their nightmares into waking reality? And behind them, the laughter from the shadows crescendoed, reminding them of the lost light. What had they awakened? As the door swung open, the darkness spilled out like a sickly foul breath, enveloping them in an oppressive shroud. Sarah hesitated, the air thick with dread. Behind her, the laughter of the figures outside pierced through the night, echoing like distorted wind chimes. She could hear them whispering, voices mingling with chilling anticipation. "Stay close, kids," she breathed, though her voice barely broke through the murky air. Jake clutched Emily's hand tighter, their little bodies trembling against the cold. They stood before a threshold that felt wrong, as if it held secrets that thrived on fear. Slowly, they stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind them with a menacing finality. Inside, the cabin was just as ominous, dim light leaking through dusty windows like faded memories. The wooden floorboards creaked underfoot, each sound echoed back at them, mocking their presence. Old portraits hung crookedly on the walls, their subjects' blank eyes seemed to follow Sarah, as if judging her every decision. "Mama, it smells funny," Emily murmured, wrinkling her nose. The faint scent of decay mingled with a spike of something metallic. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry as sandpaper. Let us find a way out," she stammered, though doubt churned in her stomach. As they moved deeper, shadows slithered along the walls, pooling in the corners and taunting her with their movements. A fireplace cracked quietly, ash-stained bricks soaked in sorrowful memories. On the mantel, an old, flickering lantern cast unsteady light, revealing a table set for a meal that would never happen. Dishes sat empty, but they felt like they had one too many occupants. Could this place have hosted the lost souls that now danced on the edges of their vision? Why is it so quiet? Jake whispered, his voice trembling. Because we shouldn't be here, Sarah replied, forcing bravery into her tone despite the icy dread coiling in her belly. In an instant, the lantern flickered more violently, shadows leapt to life, and whispers surged around them, wrapping them in a cocoon of terror. Words formed, but their meanings twisted in her mind as if they spoke in a language lost to time. "Mama, I can't see," Jake cried out, panic breaking through. "Just hold on to Emily, don't let go," she urged, grasping for control, but her own vision darkened, clouded by fear. Then came the sound. A soft, scratching noise, getting closer. Something dragged against the wooden walls, the source invisible, lurking in the depths. "Mama, what is that?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper, more afraid than before. "I don't know," Sarah replied, dread wrapping around her heart like cold fingers squeezing tight. She tightened her grip on her children's shoulders, turning them toward the door they had just come through. The lantern flickered violently one last time, before plunging them into an overwhelming darkness. The scratching stopped, replaced by low, jagged breaths, close enough to feel the heat radiating from whatever waited beyond. "Run!" She couldn't think. Adrenaline surged, propelling her forward toward the door. The sound of their pounding hearts drowned out everything else. Behind them, the breathing quickened, now filled with a grotesque eagerness. As the door loomed before them, Sarah threw it open, sunlight beckoning like hope, a sanctuary from the horrors within. But just as they burst out into the light, everything froze. The figures from before were waiting, like wolves poised upon a hunt. Their grins stretched wider, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Where do you think you're going?" Fear gripped Sarah, her body frozen between the door and the figures that circled. She could either retreat back into the dark cabin or confront whatever nightmare awaited on the other side. But the laughter erupted around her, shaking the very ground beneath her feet. Suddenly, shadows pulled at her feet, reaching out as if to grab them by the ankles. Was there really any way out? Or had they entered a trap where hope meant nothing at all? As Sarah's pulse raced, a chilling realization set in. They were not the first to walk this path, nor would they be the last. What truly haunted the cabin? And what choices would lead to salvation or doom? The air outside felt electrified, heavy with anticipation. Sarah's heart raced, pounding against her chest as dread swirled inside her like a storm. The sun hung high, but its warmth faded before the ominous cloud of figures surrounding them. Their laughter was a sickening melody, making her skin crawl. "Emily, Jake, we need to move," she ordered, her voice breaking as she tried to shove herself in front of her children. But the figures blocked their escape, shadows warping around them like smoke. One of the figures stepped forward, its grin impossibly wide, revealing teeth that glinted like sharpened daggers. "You can't leave yet. The fun is just beginning." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She realized with a jolt that these weren't ordinary people. Their eyes were hollow, pits of darkness gazing at her with wanton hunger. She yanked the children closer, scanning for a place to run. "Don't let go, okay?" she whispered to Jake and Emily. She could feel their tiny bodies trembling against hers, their own breath coming in rapid gasps. Suddenly, the figures shifted closer, closing in, their movements undulating like a ripple through water. A sickening feeling twisted in Sarah's stomach. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. Panic gripped her. She had to act. "Let us go back inside," she shouted, the idea both terrifying and possibly their only option. "Are you crazy, Mama?" Jake's voice was small, terrified. "We can't stay out here." She could sense gray shapes in the corners of her vision, lurking horrors waiting for the right moment to strike. With her heart pounding, she pushed backward into the cabin, dragging the kids with her. The door slammed shut, blocking the laughter, but the oppressive air remained thick with tension. The whispers returned, taunting her from the shadows beyond the walls, echoing through her very bones. "Now what?" Jake asked, his wide eyes searching the dark. Just a moment," Sarah replied, desperately trying to catch her breath. The only light was the faint flicker of the lantern from before, but it was barely enough to banish the looming despair. The scratching noise returned, louder and more insistent, drawing nearer, pulling at her resolve. She turned quickly. We need to find a way out, or hide. Her voice faded, caught in the echoing silence. Look, Emily pointed to a tattered curtain that hung in the corner, almost swallowed whole by shadows. It swayed slightly as if beckoning them closer. Panic surged. No, it's a trap. Just then, the sharp draft of a cold breeze swept through the room, sending a chill down Sarah's spine, followed by hushed sounds that grew louder. Whispering voices drifted through the space, wrapping around them, kissing their ears, taunting and beckoning. Join us, join us. Sarah stumbled back. Do you hear that? We need to hide in the closet. As they rushed to the corner, Emily hesitated, eyes wide as she whispered, Mama, what if they find us? They won't. They won't find us. Just close your eyes, Sarah urged, stuffing them into the small, dark space. The darkness hugged them, wrapping around each of their bodies like a suffocating blanket. Fingers trembled as she placed her hand over their mouths. They could hear the scratching noise grow louder, branches clawing against the walls. They were looking for them. Please, please don't find us, she mouthed, her heart thudding against her ribs. As the noises began to circle the room, she tried to imagine a way out, a sliver of hope, and then it came. A slow, deliberate knock echoed through the cabin, each thud resounding with sinister intent. She froze, the breath caught in her throat. What if they weren't alone anymore? Who was there? A low growl echoed, puncturing the silence. The children clutched at her, fear palpable. What waited beyond the fragile barrier that kept them hidden? Sarah held her breath, a creeping realization dawning. The figures weren't just playing games with them. They were searching. Would they find the way out? Or was this just the beginning of their nightmare? The knock came again, harder this time, reverberating like a death sentence through the cramped closet. Sarah clutched the children tighter, her heart racing faster than she thought possible. The space around them felt alive, breathing, a pulse of despair that matched her own. Please don't let them hear us, she whispered, her voice trembling, barely above a breath. Outside, the scratching intensified, as if they were clawing right at her sanity, trying to tear it apart piece by piece. Who was there? The growl persisted, darker, more malevolent, slicing through the air with stinging precision. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, a doorway opening into the very fabric of terror. Emily buried her face into Sarah's shoulder, muffling her quiet whimpers. Jake, too small to understand all the horror unfolding, sank into the abyss of fear, his small frame shaking against her. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to tell them it would be okay, but the truth was, she didn't know if they'd see another sunrise. The scratching was accompanied by the soft, sickening sound of breath that had no warmth, just the chill of a grave. They were close. Too close. Sarah peered through a gap in the closet door, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a desperate prisoner seeking escape. The sight that met her eyes made her scream, yet it paralyzed her instead. Shadows loomed outside, darker than the night itself, shifting into shapes that resembled the figures from earlier. Their hollow eyes scanned the house, searching with a ravenous hunger. I can't take this, Jake whimpered quietly, and fear surged anew at the sound of her son's voice. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the horrors to disappear, hoping against all odds that they would vanish like a bad dream. Shoo, she hissed, the volume barely escaping her lips. The whisper of a voice echoed into the dark around them. Mama, they're right there. A figure loomed, glancing sidelong at the closet, a sickly grin spreading over its face. The tallest among them, she could make out its outline, stretched its arms high, and those sharp teeth glinted cruelly in the faint light filtering beneath the door. Let us see what we can find, it said, its voice curling through the air like smoke. Sarah's blood ran cold as this new wave of panic surged through her veins. She couldn't let them find her children. Not now. Just as the figure reached out, as the door creaked ominously on its hinges, Sarah realized they wouldn't be able to stay hidden forever. With a fierce determination, she whispered to her children, when I say go, we run. Don't look back. No matter what. The words were shaky, but they steadied her resolve. Her heart thundered in her ears, drowning out the whispers that clawed for her attention. Now the voice of their pursuer was ringing clear through the wood. Now, let us play. Sarah held her breath, the moment stretching into infinity. This was it. They had to make a move. With one sharp inhale, she pulled the door open just enough, praying desperately for a fraction of a second to see the outside world again. But waiting for them was something far worse. Instead of the fresh air and safety of escape, the darkness of the cabin consumed them whole, leaving only the faintest echo of laughter that faded into silence. "Go!" she yelled, propelling her children into the open. They burst out, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The world outside felt distorted, almost as if it was trying to reject them for having left the relative safety of the cabin. The figures surged toward them, eyes glinting as they closed in with unnatural speed. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice hoarse and raw. The terrifying chase had begun, but where would they find safety from the darkness? In the distance, shadows flickered in the trees, blending seamlessly with ominous shapes that straightened into twisted forms. "What if they catch us?" Jake shouted, terror outweighing any little boy's belief in comfort. Turning back for just a moment, Sarah felt the warm breath of the unknown thrust upon her. A promise of insidious fun taunting them. Would they survive the night, or were they destined to wander forever between realms, lost amongst the wheeling shadows? The sounds of pursuit grew closer. Time was running out. If they didn't find a safe place fast, it would be the end. Where? Where do we go? Emily gasped, eyes wide. But the woods surrounding them became a labyrinth of fear, every direction a choice between despair and horror. Then, a distant light appeared, flickering like a dying star. Was it salvation, or another trap? "Follow me," Sarah screamed, racing toward the glow, not knowing in the depths of her being whether it would save them or lead them deeper into darkness. But would that light guide them to safety, or plunge them deeper into the terror that awaited? The moment Sarah and her children broke through the tree-line, the air shifted. The chill hung thick, pressing against them as if the very forest was trying to suffocate their hope. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, mocking their flight, every rustle of leaves whispering promises of doom. The flickering light beckoned like a moth to a flame, but dread coiled tightly in Sarah's stomach. "Faster," she urged, her voice sharp with panic. The path ahead wound like a serpent, twisting left and right, each bend promising an escape that never came. The light flickered again, faint but steady. It was a beacon amidst the darkness, and it pushed her onward. "Mom!" Emily cried out, but Sarah didn't dare look back. Instead, she gripped Jake's hand tighter, pulling him along, feeling his tiny fingers trembling in her palm. They were still being hunted. She could feel it in the wet breath of the wind at her neck, the prickle of unseen eyes tracing their every move. "Keep running," Sarah shouted, though she could barely hear her own voice over the pounding of her heart. Ahead, the light pulsed, brightening momentarily before dimming, creating an unsettling rhythm that made her head spin. What awaited them at its source? "Mom, I can't," Jake gasped, stopping for a second, his small chest heaving. "This isn't the time to stop." She barked, too harshly perhaps, but fear clouds judgment. She looked over her shoulder, dread flooding her veins. The dark figures had receded into the gloom but weren't gone. She felt their presence behind them, a cold echo in the woods. "Please," Emily whimpered, and Sarah's heart cracked at her daughter's terror. They needed to keep moving, to find the light, right now. Pushing through the underbrush and skirting thorny branches, they stumbled toward that flickering glow. But the ground beneath them shifted, becoming a soft loam that threatened to swallow their feet with every step. Suddenly, the light brightened, revealing a rundown cabin mixed in with the dark silhouettes of the trees. Its windows glowed like hollow eyes, inviting yet foreboding. It looked abandoned. Was it safe? It seemed impossible, yet safety was all Sarah craved. "We'll check it out," she decided, desperately clawing for any sense of security. As they neared the cabin, an incantation of whispers swirled around them, rising like steam from the ground. The air grew thick with unease, wrapping around her like a fetid blanket. The door creaked open only slightly, and she hesitated, heart racing. The whispers intensified, urging her closer. Just as she reached for the knob, a growl surfaced, low and guttural, slicing through the quiet. Panic resurfaced within her. We must go inside. They stepped in, and the door swung shut with a finality that felt like a coffin closing. Inside, shadows loomed large, flickering with the dance of a single candle that stood on a dusty table, its flame flickering wildly. The walls were lined with peculiar symbols scratched into the wood, deep and ancient. Whispers filled the air, becoming voices that twisted with familiarity, echoing her name. Sarah, a shiver raced down her spine, icy and biting. Mom, Jake squeaked, pulling at her skirt, his grip now bone-tight. Stay close, she ordered, eyes sweeping the room. The windows were boarded, trapping in the dark sanity just outside. The old cabin felt alive, the walls breathing in tandem with the whispers. Let us play, the voices teased, floating in unseen waves. The candle flickered again, and shadows wriggled like snakes, crawling toward them, seeking warmth, life, and oh, this was wrong. This was more than she bargained for. Back, she yelled, raising an arm, her heart battering against her ribs. But the shadows kept coming, inching closer, writhing at her feet. And just when she thought she couldn't take another step backward, the whispers shifted into laughter, a sound sharp and taunting. What do you want? Sarah screamed, a question swallowed by the darkness. All she got for an answer was the chilling echo of her own voice. Then, the candle snuffed out, plunging them into black. In that infinite darkness, she felt the weight of uncountable eyes watching, waiting. What had they stumbled into? And worse, what was lurking beyond that door, preparing to claim them? Dread settled in her stomach like a heavy stone. They had escaped from one horror only to dive into another, and this time, it felt like there would be no exit. Mom Emily's voice broke the silence, fragile and fearful, and the response was a howl, torn from the void, chilling Sarah's very soul as she realized the truth. They were no longer alone, but then, how to escape the whispers that rose like smoke, promising a fate worse than death? The darkness suffocated them, and the temperature plummeted as if a storm had rolled in to claim the cabin as its own. Sarah fought against the spiraling dread, but uncertainty clawed at her. It seemed the night itself had conspired to trap them here. Shadows lunged, alive with malicious joy, curving closer as if drawn to the pulse of their fear. We need to find a way out, she whispered fiercely, her heart racing like a trapped bird inside her chest. The darkness hung heavy around them, but amidst the despair, a sudden gust of wind burst against the boarded windows, stirring the air like an unearthly voice. It was a moment of clarity. The windows, she spat, hope igniting as she turned her attention to the opaque wooden barriers sealing them in. The whispers intensified, a storm of sound rising to a crescendo, mocking her urgency. Help me, she urged the kids, determination hardening her features. They rushed towards the windows together, fingers grasping the edges of the boards, peeling them back to expose the night. With every splintered piece she removed, more of the outside world crept back in, a world full of uncertainty and darkness, yet filled with the possibility of escape. Look, Jake shouted, pointing outside. The faint flicker of light shone through the brush, pulsing like a beacon. But what if we go out there? Emily asked, her face pale as moonlight. The weight of their choices pressed down on Sarah. We have to, there's no other option. The sinister laughter grew louder, echoing from the corners of the room as they pushed one final board aside. The way out there. Almost sacred, the light beyond beckoned, offering a fleeting promise of safety and warmth. We move on 3. 1, 2, 3. They stumbled through the hastily opened space, tumbling into the night. Adrenaline surged as they burst out from the suffocating darkness, and for a split second, the cool night air washed over their skin like salvation. The figures remained behind, their laughter trailing behind them like a sinister shadow, fading as they ran. Don't look back, Sarah urged fiercely, sensing their presence lingering like predators waiting for a lapse in judgment. Stick together. Breath ragged, they dashed toward the distant flickering light, desperation propelling them forward. Shapes crested the branches of the trees like a bad dream, but the light, whatever it was, shined with a promise they needed to believe in. As they rushed through the underbrush, branches clawed at their clothes, but nothing would deter them now. It's getting stronger, Jake yelled, an edge of hope creeping into his voice. It has to be close. They broke through the final line of trees and stumbled onto a clearing, the light radiant against the backdrop of deepening shadows. There stood an old, weathered lighthouse, its powerful beams slicing through the darkness, chasing away the horrors they had fled. As they ran towards the lighthouse, a sense of calm washed over Sarah. "We made it," she gasped, but somewhere within her, a whisper of doubt clung. Shadows still darted around them, darker shapes blending into the corners of her vision. "Inside now?" she urged, urgency fueled by instinct. They raced up to the door, finding it unlocked and inviting. With one hard shove, they burst inside. The interior was dim, punctuated by the occasional flicker of light, and temporarily felt safe, but an unsettling stillness enveloped them. "Is it safe, Mama?" Emily asked, her voice quavering. "For now," Sarah said, the whisper barely passing her lips. Without warning, the slamming of the door echoed like thunder, sealing them in. The lighthouse creaked around them, a living thing that pulsed with unseen energy. "Over there." Jake pointed to a spiraling staircase leading up to the lantern room. "We can see what's out there from the top." "Okay, stay close," she ordered, and they ascended quickly, adrenaline coursing through their veins. With every step upward, the haunting feeling of being watched returned, a shadow looming heavier as they climbed higher. Finally, they reached the top, exposed to the glimmering expanse of stars, vast and endless. The sweeping light of the beacon cast a reassuring glow over the trees, illuminating the outlines of the figures lingering just beyond the tree line, waiting but not approaching. "Why aren't they coming?" Jake breathed, and Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, shooing away the urge to look down again. "Maybe they can't cross the threshold," Sarah murmured, her own voice shaky. But the assurance was a fragile one. The air felt charged. They weren't out of danger yet. The figures remained just within the reach of shadow, plots twisting in the darkness. Mama Emily's voice quivered, her worry palpable. "What do we do now?" "We wait for sunrise," Sarah said with fierce determination, bottling the fear that threatened to spill over. They watched the horizon as the dawn broke slowly, revealing the landscape, the lighthouse bathing them in soft light, the weight of the night retreating. But as the sun began to rise, the shadows retreated, revealing naught but trees and quieting the whispers that had plagued them. Had they escaped? Or was this moment only the beginning of a new chapter? "Can we go home now?" Jake whispered, hope creeping back into his voice. "Yes, baby," Sarah breathed, feeling tender warmth in her heart. With the light of day brightening their route home, she smiled softly. They would try to forget the night, the horror they defaced. They would reclaim their lives. Together, they descended, hope lighting the way ahead, leaving the haunting shadows behind. But in the depths of the forest, laughter echoed through the trees, a promise that the darkness would linger, waiting, always waiting. Now, before you go anywhere, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this creepy ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans know how important it is to support the channel. So let's stand together.